Hi, everyone, and welcome to the opening session of IHA's Connect Fall 2022. I'm Peter Giannetti with Homepage News, and we are going to bring you over the next 3 days some unique insights covering a variety of important topics for the housewares industry and its retailers heading into the holidays and into 2023. This first session today is Opportunities in Inflationary Times. And I'm pleased to introduce our panelist, Joe Derochowski, who's the home industry advisor for the NPD Group. For this opening session, Joe will also answer select questions submitted by session attendees ahead of today's presentation. And you may also submit questions during the session using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll get to as many questions as time permits at the end. A note that these sessions are also being recorded and will be available hopefully within the next 2 weeks or so on the IHA website. You can read more about Joe's bio on the Connect Fall page at theinspiredhomeshow.com. Joe, welcome. Let's get started.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you, everybody, for joining today's session here. You know, it is a very interesting time that we're in. Across NPD, we track a lot of general merchandise, and we also recently merged with IRI, so we also now track the grocery business as well. But if we look across general merchandise, we can see that price increases have happened across the board. Pretty much every industry has increased. Overall, it's been up 7% year to date. We're seeing housewares up a little bit above the average, and small appliances, which are kitchen electrics, personal care, and home environment, all being a little bit below that. But overall, we're in these unique times where pricing across the board has increased, not only this year, but also increased last year. So it is very much inflationary times. The consumer has seen it, but it hasn't always impacted their behavior. And so what my goal of today is really to try to hopefully share some information that helps you look at the world a little bit differently and realize there are growth opportunities this year. There is money that's going to be made in 2023. And I hope that I share some information that helps you think of a new way to help grow your business. You know, as I prepared for this, I started to think of an old quote. There's a colleague of mine, a gentleman named Harry Balzer, who used to speak on the food industry. When he used to speak, he started a lot of his presentations with this quote, which is, "The purpose of research is to see what everybody else sees, but to think what nobody else thinks." Founded by Albert Yorgi, who founded Vitamin C in the Body, Nobel Prize winner. But I thought when I started preparing for this, I'm like, this really is the goal that I want to do, is I want to show you the world as it is. There's things that you probably are going to say, yes, I see it, but I hope it spurs a creative thought that helps you grow your business. So with that, I'm going to start with also another thing that is kind of maybe a different way to look at things. I have good news for you, and that is the pandemic is over. Now, that is not because of what President Biden, there's no politics being put into here. I say this because of one thing. I saw last week on the Today Show a huge article on butterboards. And my immediate response is, we are no longer afraid of viruses and germs. We don't mind double dipping and sharing across the board. Now, to give you a sense for this, why I found this fascinating is during the early part of the pandemic, especially in 2020, when we look at the appetizers and the desserts and the main dishes that were being served at entertaining moments, they tended to be more individually oriented, so you could help protect yourself. We weren't sharing, like making of desserts that everybody was sharing. It was more, instead, you made a mini bundt cake and each person got their own mini bundt cake. But if we're back to the point of sharing our desserts, of sharing our appetizers, which then means it's going to change the types of foods that we use in entertaining moment, we clearly are no longer afraid about spreading germs and viruses as it relates to this. Maybe to a degree that might be a little excessive. But the reason why I say this is important is as we head to this holiday season, I suspect some of the more foods, appetizers, and desserts that we started to see during the holidays will start to play back out this current holiday as we start to head into season. So the question is, does that change the type of serving dishes we use? Does that change the type of foods that we use? Is it something that make it easier for the consumer to store these products? So we want to be thinking about that, this idea of more of sharing our foods, more of those things that are shareable, especially as it relates to appetizers and desserts. We want to start thinking, what does that mean for this holiday season? Okay, a little bit of trends before I get into the 5 big things that I want us to be focusing on for growth opportunities for 2023, but a quick grounding on the current trends. This is trends across the home industry using home environment, kitchen electrics, personal care, and housewares. And it's strictly just units. I don't want to put dollars into the equation because of the rising prices, but let's take a look at units. And specifically, I want you to focus on the gray line. That is 2019 numbers. And then I want you to focus on the purple line, which is 2022 numbers. The first thing to take away is that purple line is starting to mirror the rhythm of 2019. And I suspect as we go forward in 23 and in 24, you're going to start to see that your traditional needs that the consumers have at different months of the year and different weeks of the year are going to start to mirror each other. And there might be some adjustments if we move promotional dates on something, but overall, we're going to start to mirror that rhythm. But the second thing that gets hidden here, what most people focus on, is that they focus on, if we compare this to 2021, we are significantly below where we were in 2021, and that is true. But what we also lose sight is that we are well above 2019. And here's a way to think about it. Almost all other industries that we track in general merchandise, and we go overall across the board, the units are below 2019. We're one of the few industries where units are still above that area. Now, yes, we're down versus 2021 and 2022, but we need to be, or in 2020, but we need to realize that was nirvana. That was as high up as we can get. In a lockdown life, we were basically focused in eating all of our meals at home. Part of our entertaining was trying to cook more meals and learn new tricks or making new beverages that people have. We also started having less expenses by not going out as much. And we were given some money by stimulus money. So it's one of those things where, yes, we are down below, especially you can see the early part of 2021 in March there when that stimulus money came out in the first 2 weeks of January, that yes, we are down significantly versus that. But don't lose sight that we are still up versus 2019. And we are up, if we look at this to give you another perspective, if we go across all general merchandise, the blue bar is trends versus last year. And there's only one industry that's up, and that's beauty. And that's because if you think about a year ago, you're comping versus a lockdown life where you're wearing masks and stuff, and now you don't have to wear it as you go back out. And some of those other areas related, we even see in small appliances, personal care, you'll see doing well. A lot of that is driven by women's styling products. Those things that help, we started dressing up more. We started trying to look our best as we started to go back out on dates, as we returned to the office. So we saw a lot of beauty, but if we go outside of that, we compare to 2019, look at the green arrows, that's versus 2019. Housewares is the fastest growing industry still. We are still home centric. Small appliances is in the top 3. We also see toys and juvenile in part with the changes that we're having there. And part of that, there's been a little bit of a baby boom this year, but you're seeing some of that change starting to happen at this moment. If we go across the home segments that we track, we're also seeing on top, you're going to see dollar change, unit change, and ASP. All those segments across home that we track are currently up from an ASP, but all of them are down from the units. And from a dollar, there's a little bit of growth that's happening in kitchen and bath, and a little bit of growth that's happening in personal care. But each one has its own story. Each one has something going on with it. Home environment, the hot product that's happening there that's growing are hand vacuums as we extend across the house, as well as heaters because it was a little bit of a colder spring that we typically have. Kitchen appliances, rice cookers and ice cream makers and sandwich makers were some of the fastest growing, along with vacuum sealer bags and frothers. In essence, we started allowing carbs back into the diet. We are bringing back oatmeal. We're still looking for treats for ice cream. We're looking for portable breakfasts with the sandwich makers. We're looking to save money with vacuum sealers. And we're still getting a lot of our specialty coffee with frothers, mocha pots, things like that growing in kitchen appliances. Personal care, electric toothbrushes, and garment steamers and women's styling products have really been leading it, in part because dentist offices were closed, not as much frequently in 2021 as they are currently as we come out, or as we travel more for garment steamers. Housewares, a lot of it is canning jars, are doing very well. Again, that activity continues, but we start seeing decorating tools and cookie and biscuit cutters as people start to change the type of desserts that they're serving at entertaining moment. Textiles is being driven by bath, which continues to grow because there's some bathroom remodels, which we'll talk about in the kitchen and bath. That area really has been driven by remodels, and the fastest growing things are bidets or shower head tub combo faucets and garbage disposals. We're seeing major appliances being driven by laundry and ice makers, really being a big part. Trash compactors are also in the top areas of fast growing. So we're seeing these changes. There's growth everywhere. Grills, it's been griddles and portable grills and pellets. And home improvement has been about storage area that continues to remain strong. So there are growth areas that we should continue to see some of these needs playing out in 2023. We just have to be thinking about where are these opportunities and what is the change in behaviors that people have. That said, I try to paint that positive picture because we do what we call a future of home, which is a forecast across 160 some subcategories where we look 3 years out by quarter. What's that forecast? And if you look to the right, you can see that we're forecasting this year to end up about 7% down in units, but we're seeing 22 and 23 or 23 and 24 also forecasted to decline, in part because we're just returning to center. Now you can see that the units are still 2.2 billion, is still up way significantly versus pre-pandemic. So we have to be viewing these opportunities as not necessarily comping versus the year prior, but really just sitting there going, there's a change in behavior that's happening in 23 and 24. And if we take advantage of these changes in behaviors, there's some money to be made. So let's take a look at what some of the things to be thinking about, what these growth opportunities. And because its purpose is to see what everyone else sees, but think what no one else thinks, I thought I'd add a few questions here to get people thinking. Is the recession a headwind or a tailwind? Seeing what everyone else sees, but thinking what nobody else thinks. For me, it's probably a little bit of a tailwind. There certainly are some headwinds that we'll see, and especially if it's non-essential type of item, you're going to have a little bit more of a headwind. But it could impact possibly some large home improvement projects, things of that nature. But overall, what we sometimes forget is, and one of the things we've been able to do with our partnership with IRI and our food team, I think David Portoletin and the IRI folks to be able to come up with this, they calculated the ability of what are the costs of meals in home and what's the cost of meals away from home. And you can see that the average cost of a meal away from home is 3 to 4 times that of in-home. And even though the cost, and we see it in the news, of groceries is increasing, it's increasing a little faster than away from home, which is kind of unique. But because it's such a different base, it doesn't matter. And so one of the things that we've seen historically, every single time that we've hit a recessionary or a difficult economic times, we eat more meals at home. And if because we're more meals at home, that opens the door for a more home-centric lifestyle and opens the door for more opportunities for us to solve consumer needs. And let me give you an example. If we look at some of the restaurant data and we look at lower income households, this is the number of meals taken from a food service restaurant. And you can see the largest decline is happening of those under 25,000 and under 45,000. Well, I can tell you over the past 2-3 years, most of our growth has been happening 100,000 plus, followed by the 75 to 100,000, in part because that's the family stage of life where you eat more meals at home and you spend more entertaining at home. You actually own homes in that space. So while there is an impact, don't be surprised that there still is very much opportunities for us. Another thing that we see from a growing consumer need is if we look at the time spent, we're going to see that convenience lever dial up. The number of meals that are growing are really more those less than 5 minutes. coming from our food group. While during the lockdown phase, the growth was really those meals 30 minutes plus. So what's going to happen is the consumer made all these new meals in 2020 and 2021, and they've loved them. So they're going to have this desire to continue to make those meals and continue to make additional meals. But now the time's going to be pressed as they start to return back to the office, kids' activities, adult activities, and return to school. So the question is for us, if there's anything we can do to help them make those meals, to make the planning, to make the preparing, to make the heating, to make the serving, to make the cleanup and the storage, if we can help them in that process by either saving a step, saving a little bit of time in that step, we can be rewarded. So it's very important for us to really be thinking about how can we, that convenience need is being dialed up. How can we help the consumer feed the family in a more efficient manner than it could be? And I'll give you another example. One of the things that happened during the pandemic is the number of items being served are different. We are more willing to acquiesce to serving something different for kids, maybe even each kid different than what the parents are eating. Well, that short order cook behavior that we started to do in the lockdown phase, that's going to go away as we go back to the office and these activities. But the need is still there. So if we can coordinate or create some efficiencies, we can really help the consumer and we can make some money while doing it at that time. I'll give you another big growing consumer need as it relates to that convenience. You know, we track the number of bodies from our innovation lab. They're able to track kind of the number of bodies that are working from home as opposed to working from the office. And what we saw last year is, you know, ebbed and flow. It kind of, people returned to the office last August and September, but when Omicron hit, they went back home. But we saw this year that in February, there was again a return to the office. And then in March and April, it kind of bounced back up a little bit. But what happened in February? As we went to the office, what were some of the needs? And so when I look at our February data, you know what the thing that grew the fastest? Portable beverageware, which totally makes sense as you return to the office. It grew 14%. So we need to be thinking about, as we return to the office, some of those growing needs is we're going to be thinking about how do we feed ourselves different? How do we handle our coffee, our mid-morning snacks, or mid-afternoon snacks? How do we handle lunch? And all of those are going to present opportunities for us. And it's not just from a food perspective. We might want to make sure that our office space that is cool when it needs to be cool, or hot when it needs to be hot, or is clean at the space that makes me feel comfortable. So there's lots of opportunities that we're going to have as we start to return back to the office. Another growing need is, if we really look at one of the changes, is we saw tremendous growth. If I look at July and August of this year, because that's really kind of comparing kind of a non-lockdown life versus a non-lockdown life a year ago, because the vaccines really happened really April, May is when you got your first and second, a little bit of June. But if we compare this time, look at the items that are growing the fastest. Specialty food storage, and this is from a unit, pie cake brownie servers, crackers and picks, and housewares, dinnerware. Boy, if that doesn't talk about an outdoor party happening right now, you can clearly see that this doing larger group entertaining, doing things that allow us to serve items that multiple people can eat off of is starting to play out. Now, the question for us as we head into 23 is really, in this holiday as well, is saying now we're going to bring back indoor entertaining. So as we start to do the holiday parties, as we start to do Super Bowl parties and things of that nature, what are the appetizers we're going to be eating? What are the desserts? What types of foods are we going to start to serve? And I think the bigger thing is, what can we do to inspire the consumer right now? Because they're looking for something new. They're looking for something different. That butterboard doesn't illustrate that point, where we're open to new ideas. Just recognize we're looking to be inspired. Okay, the second thing I want us to be thinking about is looking to expand to new audiences in 23. Oftentimes we get focused on, either we may not even know who our target is, but we want to focus, what are some new audiences? So let me give you one example. Here's a question. What kitchen electric, and it's a weird worded question, so I apologize. I ran it funny, but the data's there. What kitchen electric has a higher share of wallet amongst Hispanics versus total population? So if I take all of the home products that we have, and I rank them and figure out their share of spend amongst different ethnicities, what is the kitchen electric that has the highest share of wallet amongst Hispanics compared to the total population? Well, it's traditional blenders and single serve blending and processing. And if you study the eating habits, you see a lot more homemade meals, a lot more involved in the prep, a lot more ingredients being prepared in Hispanic dishes, especially in first generation. But as we go from first, second, and third generation, they start to mirror the rest of the country, but there still is some unique nuances. So the question for us is, A, are we solving the needs for, in this case, for example, for Hispanics? Are we marketing to Hispanics and marketing in a way that connects to them? If we look at the growing population over the next decade, this is going to be one of the fastest growing segments of the population. So the question is, are we fully leveraging this new audience? How about this? We talk about recessionary times. What about food SNAP participants? If we really want to look at the lower income consumer, if we look at SNAP participants, you're seeing in that second thing, a lot of poultry mixed dishes. You really want to help the lower income consumer. Are we making sure that we have cookware that is designed to help with something that is a mixture of vegetables, a mixture of chicken or other protein, poultry that's going to be in there? Are we helping them make those dishes in a more efficient manner because time is going to be compressed? Are we helping with waffles and the ability to better heat the waffles, the ability to better serve them? Are we making it much easier or even marketing to allowing kids to be able to handle this on their own? So the question is, as we look at different audiences, is there something we can do to tailor our message? Is there something we can do to tailor our products to help that consumer in a better moment? And focusing on low income, and this is a different way our food team did this, and it was very nice of them, but they looked at it more under 75,000, building up the base size. And if you look at this, you see a lot of ready-to-eat food, canned pasta, frozen pot pies, some frozen dishes, frozen sandwiches. And part of the reason that this is seeing what everyone else sees, but thinking what no one else thinks, is oftentimes this tends to be a younger consumer. Because when you're younger, you just don't make as much. And when you're younger, a lot of times you're cooking for one. And it's very hard to cook for one. So I don't think we think about feeding the family. But what about the single person house? Whether a younger, or maybe they become an empty nester, maybe they become widowed. And so are we looking for ways to help people at that stage prepare the foods that they're looking for at this time? And in this case, it really is the ability to heat and warm up food. There's not as much in the prep phase. It looks more about the heating and the serving part of it that we have. And let me give you an example. If we look at air fryers, the usage of air fryers, isn't the purchase, the usage of air fryers, that you can see the occasions per capita amongst the 75,000 households or under remains fairly strong. Where incomes above 75 saw a big spike during the lockdown phase, but once the lockdown phase changed, we started to see a little bit of a change in usage. Now, part of that is because one is more family oriented and the other is more single one or two person household oriented. The other part is the ability to use it at different meal occasions. So it's very important for us to be thinking about, are we satisfying the needs for all these different audiences? For families, one, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and for individual households, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All right, another area we want to be thinking about is refining our execution. Again, if the forecast is showing a decline this year, there still is money to be made. And one of the ways is really just making sure we are maximizing the execution. Let me give you an example. Which home segment, the four listed below, was promoted more so far this year? Started to see a large growth. The answer, if it is that purple line, is kitchen appliances. And you can see around week 17, while all of us are trying to plow through some of the inventory that's out there, we saw kitchen appliances especially see a more dramatic growth of the number of units sold on promotion. And not only do we see that dramatic growth of the units being sold on promotion, but if we look at, and the green line is again the units sold on promotion, but the blue line is the depth of discount. And we didn't see that depth of discount really increase as much, in part because what's happening is it's the frequency of the promotion that's happening. So here's the suggestion that I have for all of us. Now, at NPD, we do pricing and promotion efforts with our clients. We have tools that allow them to do simulators. So whether it's with NPD or anyone else, if you're someone else you're working with, great. The key is all of us have to be really rethinking, are we promoting the right weeks? Do we do the same method that we did in 2019? Do we do maybe some of the times in 2021? Or are there better weeks where we actually have less subsidization and higher incremental? Do we have to increase the number of promotions? Do we have to decrease? Do we have to increase the depth? This is the time in 23 that we need to really rethink about how do we maximize the execution of our pricing and promotion strategy. And if we do that right, then we have a chance to make more profit. Maybe we won't get the sales, but we'll get more and more of the profit. And who knows, we might get more of the sales at that time too. So we have to win the execution. Everybody needs to really rethink and take a rigorous approach to what truly is our strategy when it comes to pricing and promotion. All right, the fourth thing that I want us to be thinking about is really, can we be more nimble? So let me give you another example. Which quarter did fans decline the most? And I'll give you a hint. It's declined this year so far. The answer is Q2. If we look at Q1, there's a little bit of a decline, but it's really returned to where it was pre-pandemic. And if we look at Q3, it's actually up a little bit so far to date. But it's Q2 where we saw some of the change. Now, why is that? Part of it is because the first 6 to 8 weeks of Q2 was colder in the northern countries and some of the western states compared to normal. So how do we adjust for this? And if we look at it, you actually see the largest decline really in the Pacific region, but you also see some of it in the northern central regions that we have. So whether it's weather related because of being cold or hot, because of storms and hurricanes that are going through, or because of forest fires, given the advancements that we have worked on this past 2 years of selling online, of being able to meet the consumer needs in a little bit more efficient fashion from warehousing and shipping and taking orders, is there a way that we can take some of that and say, can we be more nimble in our own infrastructure so that as maybe weather patterns happen, we can adjust quicker to the needs of the consumer? Or as something else happens across the country that we're better take advantage. Let me give you one more example. While we declined, there are 4 DMAs that grew in small appliances. The top 4 DMAs: Laredo, Texas, Glendive, Montana, Austin, Texas, and Odessa and Midland. Now, we know there's a lot of manufacturing around the Laredo area and along the Mexican border there. So we see a lot of home sales happening. Same thing with Austin, same thing Glendive, Odessa, and Midland as well. As the consumers are moving, it could be changed to manufacturing plants. It could be changed to retirement needs. It could be changed to where the jobs are. Are we addressing and moving quickly to meet those consumer needs as this continues to happen? Or I'll give another example right here. This is overall trends by home, by age. And I want you to take a look at this blue line, which is 18 to 24. And you can see that when the lockdown happened in May, June, July, that they were the fastest growing group because they, for the first time, had to stop going to restaurants and stop going to bars for their entertaining and had to start making their meals at home, had to start cleaning the homes a little bit more, had to do a little bit more entertaining at that moment. So the question is, as that happens, as we ebb and flow through different viruses that will probably always be there, and as we have spikes and declines and changes, as we do return to works, are we able to meet the needs of the different folks? And in this case here, there might be another time while 18 to 24-year-olds have reduced over the past 2021 here, the past year, there might be times that they spike back up of spending more time at home. And if they do, That's a different set of products. That's a different mix. That's a different assortment that we're going to need to address that consumer. So we want to be thinking about, are we being truly nimble to adapt to the changing needs and changing dynamics that the consumer is going through, or the changing weather patterns that adjust the needs as well. Final thing is we need to continue innovation. Now, I'm not going to talk about product as much. Well, let me clarify this. Which theme night plays a bigger portion of that day's perspective? Meatless Mondays, Taco Tuesday, Pizza Friday. The answer, and thanks to our food folks, but Pizza Friday, 19% of all pizza dinners are eaten on Friday. Tacos, 18% on Tuesday. Meatless Mondays, about 16%. Are we doing anything to help inspire these life moments? Are there others that are out there that we're not even thinking about? You know, if we look, we did a consumer survey at the time trying what some of the challenges at the beginning of the year. One of the things that they said is getting new ideas for main meals or preparing healthy and well-balanced meals. One of the innovations, yes, we need to innovate in products. And if sales go down, that's probably the biggest fear I have, is that we pull back on innovation. We can't do that. We need to dial it up because the adjusting in consumer behavior is happening now, which means there's needs to be met and there's money to be made. And this will set the foundation for the rest of the decade. If we do this right, we can sit there and say, how can we solve it? But part of that solving is not just products. Part of it is just marketing and speaking to the consumer and inspiring the consumer to solve these needs. And if we do it right, we can make a lot of money this next year. So let me give you an example from our beauty group that I thought was an interesting, and see if this spurs some thoughts, and I appreciate them. They're showing the sales in thousands, the blue line of Peter Thomas Roth Instant Firm X Eye Tighten. And you can see it's pretty much hovering along, going pretty consistent. And then suddenly we saw a large spike. And then at that time, what we saw was a large spike in Google search. What made it go viral? Was it Halle Bieber, an influencer, a celebrity, talking about it? Was it a TikTok user posting their own video in Trinidad? Was it the brand promoting their efforts on TikTok and the benefits? Or was it an influencer also doing it on TikToks and talking about tips that they had? What do you think? The answer, Trinidad. Now, we've seen slime, we've seen Visco Girl, now we see butterboards, right? What are these things that we can help inspire the consumer, and so that they become our advocates for us? And the biggest part is making the advocates also, not just in using the products, but there are needs, that there's a tension in the needs of wanting to do those behaviors that they like during the lockdown, like maybe more involved meals. But is there a better way to do it? Or ways to now start carrying their breakfasts to the office? How do they handle that? How do they start handling the indoor entertaining in these situations? How do we clean the houses better? How do we get ready faster? If there's a suggestion that you can inspire the consumer, utilizing all means, do it. This is a time when we need a lot of creative innovation to change things. All right, so in summary, despite the inflationary times, there are growth opportunities if we look for growing consumer needs, new audiences, winning the execution, being nimble, and we need to continue to innovate. And these are things that you guys know, but hopefully I spurred a little bit of creative thoughts and a new way to look at things. If you ever have any questions or need any information, Jocelyn Griffiths is a colleague of mine, a wonderful person who would be more than happy to help you out. And with that, Peter, I will turn it over to you for any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. It is always very informative and provocative to listen to you provide some insight for our industry. I have a number of questions I want to get to. One of the first questions that comes to us is, When do we stop comparing to 2019 and start? Where's that normalization? Where's that new kind of baseline going to stop? Is it 2023, 2024? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I like September 12th personally.
Okay.
And the reason why for September 12th is a year ago is when people started return back to school, start to return back to the office. If you think the three big time disruptors, I know we talk a lot of economics, but I'm more concerned about the time disruptors. And two of the big three, schools and activities, started to return last September. The third one is the return to the office, which also started to return a little bit last September. So I like to compare back to that time, especially. Now, while I say that though, because of the return to office it's going to take a time to settle in. Like there's going to be ups and downs over the next probably 6-8 quarters. And as that happens, it's going to be a case where the needs are going to change each of those times because our time is being disrupted. So how do I say? I'm not going to throw away the benchmarks to 2019. I will keep them, but they're not going to be to the forefront like they were all the way up to September 12th.
Yep. Thank you. You mentioned the opportunity to rethink the promotional strategy. You actually focused on how to drive profit through rethinking that promotion. What are your thoughts on the earlier holiday promotional strategies that we're seeing in place every year? It seems like it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks early. I mean, is the retailer going to be able to double down again later on in the season and maybe get some additional, or are they just spreading out the sales over a long period of time and trying to get it in as soon as possible?
Well, I can just talk about the history of what we've seen before and what I suspect this year it's just going to stretch out the buying season. Okay. So what we did see is it'd be a little bit of a combination of 2020 and 2021. So let me be specific. In 2020, we had Prime and Deal Days starting back in October. Right. And what happened is we did see a bump, especially in some of the small appliances. And traditionally, those things that kind of lead the Black Friday week sales. And so what happened in 2020 is while we saw the bump in October, Black Friday actually was down. So a little bit at that time. And my interpretation of that is there's a group of shoppers. Whenever I think of holidays, there's three things. We've got those people that are looking for deals. And so for them, they're a little bit more organized and so there's going to be a little bit of a correlation on those early promotion periods and the big promotion periods like Black Friday, Cyber Monday at that period. The second group is the people who are maybe not as organized. And so the question is, are they organized for holiday shopping at this time? You know, in 2020, we didn't have as many activities. They might have been a little bit more organized. Now, I suspect as we go forward, they're probably not as organized, but maybe that's an innovation opportunity for us to start thinking about holidays. So some of these earlier things actually might be some of what we call that self-gifting, those things that buy in for else. They could be some holiday gifting too for those people who are organized, but there's another group that's going to be self-gifting. I think one of the things we want to think about is we've got not only the gifting needs and the self-gifting, but we also have the needs of the meal occasions over the holidays and just the overall needs throughout that period. Now, the second thing that happened is in 2021, what we saw is it extended. That last week was a very large week because Christmas is on Saturday. Well, this year it's on Sunday. So historically, that's a big week, especially personal care or some of those items that have value. We see a lot of massaging appliances, electric toothbrushes, things of that nature being given at that time, even some of the espresso makers. So with this happening on Sunday, I suspect this last week is also going to be strong. Whereas next year we start hitting at another time period, and that might not be area. And because it's on a Sunday and New Year's is on Saturday, I suspect we might have more people take off between Christmas and New Year's, and maybe more people staying at people's houses. And so the needs to clean and bedding and all that stuff. So I think a lot of it is it's stretching out the time period, but it also is when it falls, changes the needs that also drive it beyond gifting. It's a long answer.
But that puts a lot of focus on your point about being operationally nimble. There may be a moment come late in the season where there's the potential for a wave. it's a tough balance for retailers to try to figure out what their inventory needs are going to be through the season. I think some would rather end up short than long. Well, most would rather end up short than long at the end of the year, but there's usually something that happens later on in the season, and the winners are going to be those who are kind of nimble enough to serve that wave or serve that burst of demand, correct?
Yep. And the good news is everybody's going to get a gift this year.
Exactly. We have a few questions about pricing, and you touched on pricing. And I think I'll summarize the questions in one, and then I'll ask another one after that. It seems like there is just a lot of pressure or emphasis on driving business through lower prices, despite inflation. In other words, trying to overcome the inflationary effects that are kind of beyond the houseware sales, all the other things in life that are costing more, food and things. Do you believe that there needs to be this balance of more competitive pricing? I won't use the word low pricing, more competitive pricing, and sort of that innovation or that ability to kind of increase the value some other way? How do you balance that?
Well, and there's a lot that you hit into that message too, because it's kind of like, as it drive traffic, how do you manage? It's a very, very tough question. And I do get concerned about us as an industry. Are we changing behavior, or are we accidentally leaving money on the table, off the table? So I do think we really need a rigorous and disciplined approach. Consumers, what we're seeing to date, so let me give you some of the facts. What we're seeing to date is it's not necessarily the lowest prices that are growing. In fact, it's usually more of the higher prices, or more of those prices just above the floor, that are leading the growth. And a big part of that is because a lot of the growth is happening amongst the households that's $100,000 plus, or the older generation. So they're not as far along. There was a tremendous amount of stimulus money given out during the period, and as you're lower income, you're feeling the pinch more. And then it's kind of like the Titanic, the water's rising across different income levels. So I think for us to be really thinking about it, the consumer, I think where they're going to net out, and what the data is showing now and what it showed pre-pandemic, is we want value. We want to know that if we spend money on something, that what we bought is going to do the job that I expected it to do. And if that means I need to pay a little bit more, I might. And especially if there's innovation to solve it. What we saw pre-pandemic, it wasn't always the lowest prices that grew, as more of the prices just above the floor, or the higher prices. I suspect that if there's innovation, that's what the consumer is going to be looking for. If there's no innovation, it's a commodity, they're going to want the lowest price. So I think it's incumbent upon us from a marketing and product perspective to really make sure, are we solving the needs? Are we really looking at the price point that people would be willing to spend? And the last thing I would be talking about is, don't underestimate that power of how cheap it is to eat at home compared to away from home. And we need to view ourselves as part of our food budget, which also opens the door from a marketing perspective. I'll give you an example. If you're doing your lattes and cappuccinos from Starbucks, every year, I don't know, roughly $1,200 a year, let's say, maybe you put some food on there and it's $2,000 a year. Well, if I start making that stuff at home, that's a lot of money I'm saving. So I may not be looking for the machine that is the cheapest price. I'm going to look for the one that produces the coffee to the taste that I expect. Right. So I really think it's more of a value equation than a lowest price equation.
Right. It's interesting, though. You spent some time talking about the opportunity to target lower income consumers and understand their needs. And for those who may not have realized, the SNAP, I'm not sure you covered it, but SNAP is Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Programs. Many of you might know, but if you didn't know, that creates that interesting dynamic that we just spoke to. There's an opportunity to target lower income consumers with products that are more in line with their needs and wants, and to do it cost effectively. But are you seeing like real price elasticity? If something was $9.99 and it moved up to $11.99, is there a difference? Are we seeing significant differences, which retailers believe there are, and many manufacturers, that when you move away from those quote unquote magic price points, you're losing a lot of volume and therefore a lot of momentum? Do you see some of the Is there a real difference between $9.99 and $11.99, or $19.99 and $24.99?
I hate to give you the research answer, Peter, but it depends. And that's why you got to do the research. It's going to vary by category. It's going to vary by need. It's going to vary by the innovation that happens. what the role and purpose is. So there is no like real blanket answer with that. It truly does vary. And that's why I encourage everybody to do pricing and promotion analysis within all their categories, looking at these things very, very deeply with this, because then you can truly see where the nuances are.
Do you believe then that the traditional magic price points are kind of obsolete at this point? And if you go category by category?
I think every category has its own story.
Yeah, very good, very good. There's a couple questions here about changing behaviors and cooking. You covered a lot of that going forward. If you were to look beyond kind of what's happened in the last 2 years and kind of how things are kind of clicking right now and things that have stuck, can you look in your crystal ball? Is there something coming down that people might be surprised about, whether it's how a generational change is going to affect things? Is there something that people should get ready for that really isn't baked into the data that you see right now, but you have to sort of put your forecast goggles on and take a look ahead?
And just to clarify, are you looking short term or long term?
Well,
Like, are you looking a few years out? Or
I think the easiest thing is to
are you
look
looking
nearer
more
term
next
than
year?
it is longer term, but maybe you can give us a taste of both right now.
Well, I'll give you in the short term, probably the biggest thing is don't underestimate that power of return to work and that convenience lever. So for example, that's going to dial up the need for portability at breakfast. And that's going to impact many categories and different needs for people to do it. And imagine you want to get protein at that moment. How do you do that? How do you make through all these things? So portability could be a thing, the ability to consume at the office, the ability, if you really think of it from a long-term perspective, what gets hidden in there is that 18 to 24-year-old. Think about that. Now, compared to other generations, so their big time when they're going to be really cooking at home is once you buy your first home, you have your first child, and they start getting, especially in the school age years, like that's when you start really cooking. You start cooking a lot of your meals at home. And when that happens, that generation, when they get to that life stage in whatever 8 years or how many years that's going to be, they're already much better cooks than you and I were at that generation and other generations, because the lockdown forced them to learn how to cook, to learn how to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to learn how to entertain, to learn how to do these things. So they're already going to be a little bit more savvy. Now, on top of that, even before that, their palates were already more sophisticated. You know, we look at our food data and what I hear from our food team, and you look at the types of foods that they eat, like their palates and tastes were already a bit more refined, a bit broader in experiencing different things, different tastes. So I think the ability to inspire and create new dishes and create new needs for that generation, when they hit the key moments that we start making most of our meals at home, oh man, that's going to be a phenomenal time to really come up with some new dishes to make.
A couple of categories people are asking about right now. We'll call it kind of classifications. Multifunctional product adoption versus products specific. Are you seeing any changes there? There's been a lot of talk about people embracing the multifunctionality. Does it go back? Does it start to swing back toward products that may be more function specific going forward? Is that an opportunity, or are we going to continue to see the kind of the growth of better multifunctional goods? And then obviously smart is always one of those categories that, you know, we're kind of waiting for the real boom and real explosion in the housewares and small appliance business. Where is that heading forward? Start on multifunctionality.
Well, so the way I'll kind of answer is this. It's interesting in home improvement. The one area that's grown pretty much throughout the pandemic is storage and organization.
Right.
With this home-centric lifestyle, plus our sense of wellness, part of it is we just want to feel good. Like there's something about being organized, or something about structure that we have that has become a little bit more important during the pandemic, and probably is going to stay for a little bit here. Well, what's one of the benefits of multifunctional versus something that's product specific? It takes up less room, less room in my cabinets, or less room on the counter. So I think, and then similarly, if I spend money and I spend for quality, I want to make sure that I can use this. So I think the goal, and I suggest this to people a lot of times, our goal is to try to be used up from sunup to sundown, Monday to Sunday. So that helps a little bit with multifunctionality. Now, I'm going to put a caveat on that, though. If it can't do a job specifically that allows a need, then somebody's still going to gravitate towards something that helps me accomplish the task that I'm really trying to do. So if multifunctional can accomplish the multiple tasks and do them to a level of excellence that meets the consumer's needs, because taste is a cliff. It either has it or it doesn't.
Right.
If it meets the needs, then that's great. But if it doesn't, then we'll go to specialists that we have. So I think it's a wishy-washy answer, but if we can be more organized, we'll look for multifunctional. But if it doesn't meet the needs, then we're going to look for specialization. That happens.
Where are we with the smart curve right now?
I think we're in the smart curve. We're the car that is, we're just pushing in. If we're smart, we're pushing in the clutch and getting ready to shift. Now, here's what I mean. I felt like we started a little bit ago. We viewed smart we viewed it as an app. And what smart is it's not a benefit. It's a reason to believe. And I've said before, like a lot of times when you look for these things that have, I wish, I hate, I love, I miss, moments, whatever we do, either the act of using a product or the moment around it has all of those things. And our job is to solve it. And what's happened with smart is it's evolved to being even more than just an app. We know things where your printer, HP printer, it communicates back saying, hey, you need ink. And it automatically ships it. So it's communicating back to the manufacturer. We saw some things at IFA where it's just providing lights and stuff. So the smart is causing the product to change or do something a little bit different. We see it sometimes where we're talking between products. We see there's great innovation that the major appliance companies are doing to solve what's for dinner. And all the housewares and small appliances are part of that ecosystem where it should be going forward. So I think if we view smart not as an app, but we view smart as a reason to believe to solve the I wish, I hate, I love that a consumer has and miss that they have. If it solves that, there's money to be made. And I think when it comes to seeing some of the innovation happening with majors, I think the ability for consumers to be able to make all the meals get done at, all the dishes get done at the same time to the highest quality is on the doorstep. It's just that we all got to start working together with it. So I think smart is, and it's not just there. We also see it in personal care. We see it in home environment. There's a lot of opportunities. So I think if we expand, originally we thought as a benefit and as an app, if we instead think of it as a reason to believe to solve the I wish, I hate, I loves, I miss that we have, that's where I think the opportunity is. So I think
we're going to be wrapping up shortly. So that if you have any questions out there, drop them into the Q&A and I'll try to get them in the next couple of minutes. There's a new question that came in, Joe. Is there any evidence to show more consumers preparing food in the microwave oven rather than a gas or electric oven because of energy price increases? How's microwave use sort of evolved and why is that an opportunity for this business?
So microwave use has without a doubt increased here the last little bit. And that's kind of funny because there was probably a 20-year period where it's just is what it is. But we have seen it increase recently, share of occasions increase. Now, I'm not sure if it's due to those reasons or it's more just because as we return to the office, we have a greater need for frozen foods. And we saw an increase in that. So I think part of it in return activities as well. So whether it's due to the energy part or whether I think it's really probably more due to frozen. But hey, if you can speak to the energy with all the news that's been going on around that, I kind of I'm a big fan of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think of 2020, you got to solve the lower order needs to get to the higher. 2020 was about safety in that area. 2021, once we got vaccinations, more about belongingness and connecting with others. 23 and 24 is going to be about higher order needs. So if it's something that is sustainable or energy efficient or these higher order needs, certainly talk to that, play to that. And if it's a tiebreaker, it will certainly help. The consumer is going to be more focused on that than they were in 2020. So if you can do that stuff, wonderful. But just recognize it still has to do what its primary job is.
Well, Joe, thanks again for your insights. We will look forward to hearing you somewhere down the line and see how things continue to progress. Thanks to Joe Derochowski of NPD. As mentioned earlier, these sessions will be posted on the IHA website, hopefully in a couple of weeks or so. Thank you all for your participation, and we hope to see you at additional Connect Fall 2022 sessions later today, tomorrow, and Thursday. See you guys soon. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, everybody.